Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome back to your lunch break with me. My name's Ivana if you are new here. And this is a week that I think is looking a lot different for a lot of us. This is our back to school week across Alabama. Now, this is not the traditional back to school week, maybe everybody's used to seeing with going to get school supplies, uniforms, or just back to school clothes. This is a different start to school than what we've ever seen before. So what we want to talk about today, I'm joined by our education expert, Trish Crane. And what we want to talk about is these school plans have been changing every day, and things are developing and changing per school, and it could be totally different than what was announced maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So some schools, and that is including Saraland and Enterprise, both city school districts, are both starting on Thursday. So that is just a couple of days away, and changes are still coming in rapidly. So Trish, thanks so much for coming, taking a few minutes out of following all these different plans across the state to give us a little bit of an update. So I know that we said Saraland and Enterprise open on Thursday. I've got my notes here I'm looking at. But what are those two schools doing specifically, if you know, on Thursday to kind of start the state's back to school week and start they have a big responsibility of being the first ones going back?
Yeah. Well, and schools had set calendars. Usually they set them, at least 6 months in advance. February, March, they start setting calendars. And while Dr. Mackey had suggested folks push their calendar back into the second half of August, some folks stuck with their original plan, right? A lot of them are changing. They're pushing their dates back. As we get closer to opening, they're like, wait, we're not quite ready. We've got to get teachers trained on, the new devices we're using or something. But I spoke with Saraland superintendent. He was very generous with his time. We talked last week, and he said, they're doing everything they can. He said that they had done scheduled pickup, and everybody had social distance, and everybody was wearing masks, and everybody was doing exactly what they were supposed to do. And parents and students and teachers, of course. He said, that I think he said 88% of his families wanted in-person instruction. So, he's responding to that, right? He's giving them, they're doing in-person instruction. He said a lot of sleepless nights. And that is what I'm hearing. Superintendents are under enormous pressure on a regular day, right? But then you add in, if I bring kids back, are they going to get sick? If I bring teachers back, are they going to get sick? Like this is unprecedented. I mean, absolutely unprecedented. And the thing that I hear most is a lot of prayers and a lot of, they want more data. They want more science. They want to know more about this COVID-19 and how it's transmitted. So they're just moving forward, taking all of those precautions.
We're going to show in a minute a map that Trish made actually that shows a lot of the different plans across the state. We're going to show it to you in just a second. But first, I want to talk about something Trish and I were talking about before we went live. And that is across the state, again, we're seeing these plans change. And I gathered a couple of plans from two in the Birmingham area, from Vestavia and Mountain Brook, both city schools, Huntsville City Schools, and Mobile County. I'll share those in just a second. But what I think is interesting is at least one of these plans on the website, on their school website, said they were doing one thing. And apparently it has been announced that they have changed. It's Huntsville City on their website. If you go and look, you will see that they have plans for just their traditional schooling. And as Trish told us, if the latest is actually different than that. The latest in Huntsville City is that they are going all virtual. But some of these plans have changed so quickly, they haven't even been updated on the school's website. Trish, is that surprising to you?
Well, in this day and age, yes, with this type of we need to have the most current information on our websites. Absolutely. But I don't know. Sorry, got a message. I don't know who's in charge of that. Like most of the time, people who update the website, like their teachers or their other, they have like very few school districts have somebody in charge of the website. But so what I'm finding is the best information is on social media. If one thing is good about this, I think school districts are recognizing the need to communicate with their publics better and to let them know But like in Huntsville's case, they had a press conference, right? And so I guess nobody has just gone to update the website. They probably will now, but it's just changing every day. Start dates. I mean, that's been one of the problems reporting on this stuff. Is it's the information. If you missed the announcement or you didn't see it on social media, you might not know it.
And I'm sure that's extremely frustrating for parents who are having to make decisions not only about their children and going back to school, but also about themselves and their own work or their own lives. Something that we wanted to touch on as well is after last week's announcement of the mask ordinance and continuing that into schools and requiring students in, I believe it's second grade and up, to wear masks. And after also some guidance from at least the Jefferson County Department of Health, there have been changes even over since last Thursday until now, Monday. And two of those we're seeing in a couple of districts in the Birmingham area. We've got Vestavia City Schools and Mount Brook City Schools. Both have, well, they've pushed back their start dates to August the 20th, but they also are going to something that a couple other schools have tried or are starting to implement. And that is this alternating schedule day, which means that the schools and the grades that are doing this are broken up into several groups. And some will go to campus on a Monday, Wednesday, and maybe others go on a Tuesday, Thursday. Trish, what do we know about this type of alternating schedule, and how do we expect that to go in these schools?
Well, it's interesting that when schools first started talking about what are we going to do next year, there was a lot of talk about this hybrid schedule where you keep kids in small groups and bring them back, every other day. Well, in a lot of places, that's hard on parents because, how do you say, well, I'm sorry, I can only work, Tuesday and Thursday of this week because those are the only 2 days my child is in school. That didn't, so the hybrid thing didn't catch on in Alabama. It was, there was a lot of talk at the national level, but in Alabama, typically it was, we're going to do traditional school or we're going to do virtual. And it wasn't going to be, a blend of the two. But now, I think based on, the letter that and the recommendations that Dr. Mark Wilson, the Jefferson County Health Officer, said, if you're going to bring, there's a lot of discussion. Again, there's disagreement, but there's this discussion of younger children don't transmit the COVID-19, but older kids, or they do transmit it, but not at high rates. Like it's a lower transmission rate among young kids, we think, right? That's what the science says right now. And so, but it's different in age 10 and older, supposedly, is what some of the science is saying. And this is, way off of my knowledge level here. But so the schools have said, well, so Dr. Wilson made some recommendations and said, we need to bring back the older kids. If you're going to bring back older kids, keep them separate, maybe consider a alternating schedule. But he really recommended distance learning for older kids. So, but, in places like Mountain Brook, Dr. Barlow told me that, only 7% of families there had chosen virtual school. So 93% of kids were coming back to school. In Vestavia, it was 82% were coming back to school. So you've got to have a plan there. But then after Dr. Wilson's guidance, I think, I've not spoken with the superintendents there or the boards there, but, they did shift to this. Okay, we're going to bring the older kids back on an alternating schedule.
I'm looking at some of our questions are all pouring in. This is a good question from Rhonda. And I think it's something that a lot of us maybe who don't have kids in school maybe are a little bit wondering or confused about. And also, if you are just not looped into that, she said, how is the alternating, I'll put it on the screen. Rhonda said, how is the alternating schedule going to help this situation?
Well, I think the idea is that you're not having so many kids in one space. Middle schools and high schools are generally bigger places. I mean, we have middle schools with over 1,000 kids in them, and we have high schools with 3,000 kids in them, right? So if in the smaller districts like Vestavia, gosh, I hate to say it, but I don't know how many kids are at the high school. I want to say maybe 1,500 or so. And that's a lot of kids to have in one area at one time. So I think the idea is just to keep them separate. But it's still a lot of kids.
We've got a good comment here from Adam, and he talks about having testing at the door for kids of all ages and teens of all ages. That is not something that has been implemented in our schools, right, Trish?
Right. And really, colleges have started, they've rolled out their testing plan. They're
Mhm.
testing all of the students that return to campus. Well, I just had this conversation with a superintendent this morning, and I said, "What do you think about testing everybody?" And he said, it's not really helpful because they go home every day. In college, they come onto campus and they're kind of in a bubble, and you can say you can't go home until Thanksgiving, and because it's a voluntary thing. It's not required that kids go to college, but it is required that kids go to K-12 school.
Mhm.
So it's just seen as like not going to be helpful unless you
Mhm.
test every day.
Mhm.
And there, we have a problem with having enough tests. My dog is growling at something outside. I'm sorry if you hear her in the background. But they superintendents are basically saying it's not going to be effective. It's only
Mhm.
good for one day, and then you have to retest everybody the next day. So they're really relying on parents to keep their children home
Mhm.
if they have fever, if they're showing signs of COVID.
Right.
So
This is an interesting comment here from Jan, and I think a lot of people are feeling the same way as Jan. She said, "As somebody who's immunosuppressed, I'm going to be terrified to be around my grandson, who is, I'm assuming, going to school and being around other children." And Jan, I don't think you're alone. I think we've heard that from a lot of people. I know myself, and I believe Trish has as well. We've gotten emails and comments from people saying that maybe they're teachers' aides, or faculty, and they are afraid to go back to school or have
right.
similar feelings. Jan, wow, we're getting a lot of people about different questions from people, excuse me, about different regions and if they're doing only virtual. So I'm going to put up this map, Trish, that you made for us here. And can you explain the color coding on this map?
Sure. Let me put my glasses on to make sure the legend says exactly what I'm about to tell you. And that is, yeah, so the districts in blue are the districts that are offering traditional and virtual models.
Mhm.
Now, this was updated, I think, Thursday. So I know there's some more board meetings this week. There are a lot of called board meetings every week, and
Mhm.
a lot of them are streamed live on Facebook. And
Mhm.
typically, announcements go up after these meetings that something has changed. But the districts in yellow are the ones that are going virtual only, and
Okay.
then the districts in orange are ones that I have not been able to find plans for yet. That doesn't mean that they're not done. They
Right.
just means I can't find them. So, it's changing, right? I
Right.
mean, and the idea is to keep this map updated so we can go to one place and get an idea of who's going virtual. So we're seeing rural areas, we're seeing big city districts. That are doing virtual only. Mobile County is the largest district in the state. They're doing virtual only. It's a lot of kids. It's about, I think the number, it was like 210,000 children are only going to be able to do virtual school
Mhm.
in their school system. So that's
Wow.
about a little under a third.
Wow. The Sharon said she missed the beginning of this interview. And Sharon, thanks for coming. This is Trish Crane. This is our education reporter and expert here at AL.com. And she's been following all of the different changes in the reopening plans in schools across Alabama. And these changes are coming really rapidly. So that's kind of what we've been talking about, Sharon. And we've just been going over some of the changes and some things that we have heard from different superintendents across the state. So if you have any questions, please let us know. That's our little mid-video recap. Getting some questions from Jerry. And Jerry's asking about special needs kids. And Jerry, I saw all of your comments coming in. I promised I was getting to you. But there are plenty of people who are having concerns and who have questions about their children or
Right.
somebody in their family, how those children with different needs are going to learn. And Trish, we have not seen, at least for a while this summer, we have not seen a specific plan for those kids and teenagers. Do you have any updates on that?
The short answer is no. I think what we're seeing is more like I think the planning started at the large level, like how are we going to bring all the kids back? And then now they're getting down to how are we going to serve our kids with special needs, especially in the districts, that are virtual only, right? I mean, that's really where the question is, because what we hope is that kids that are going back to traditional school, if they're going back to traditional school, that they will get the services that they need at school like they would in any given school year, right? So, but kids with special needs in virtual only districts, they're going to have limited access probably. I mean, we're guessing, it's going to be a lot like last spring, unless the district is making some special plan. Like I think it's Huntsville City Schools is said, they have said, we're going to bring in kids for their therapies. It won't be, I mean, unfortunately, like there's so much to be gained in interactions between children, and, that's not going to happen virtually. But there is a growing voice of concern, and mine included, how are kids with special needs going to be served?
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to get what they need? But really, I mean, let's be honest, virtual learning is not the best method for all kids. Kids in special education are not. So we kind of know that it's not going to be ideal for kids to learn, but it's all that these districts believe is safe at this point. So
there was a comment, and I'm not sure if it was from Jerry or somebody else. It came in a little bit earlier, but it was again about special needs children learning. And somebody said that they had a child who, I believe they said at the end of this past school year in the March-April range, was trying to do the virtual learning and just wanted to click off of the learning and wanted to open another tab and wanted to do other things on the computer. What is, all these districts, like you said, that are going virtual only, will there be separate guidelines and separate virtual plans for the children in the typical special needs classes?
I would guess, it's going to look different in every school, in every classroom, in every district. And so it's really going to be up to parents and to communicate with teachers to say, what are your expectations? What do I need to do to help my child? What are you going to do to help my child? How are we going to get our children to learn? I saw this morning, one school district had posted a remote learning pledge, and I didn't even get to read it. I opened it. It's in a tab open on my computer, right? But it's, I guess it's probably going to be something like, I promise I'm going to take this seriously, because it's hard. It's hard to, I just can't imagine. Like, again, I'm glad my children are grown, because I think this is really hard for parents, especially, parents who have to work. How are you gonna, and that's most of them, right? I mean, it's unusual not to have to work. So
there, and going on again on this special education topic here, and we might just need to get a special education expert here to help us out, because it seems like so many of you have questions. So if y'all would like that, let me know. But we have a question. I cannot remember who it's from. Again, it kind of fell up a little bit higher, but they talked about if they are in the classroom, if special needs children are in the classroom and teens, what about the teachers and the people teaching in those classrooms where it might be a little bit harder to socially distance, to keep everybody separate, to do things without touching or being close to each other? What about those people who work in those classrooms, and how will they be expected to do their job in the time of COVID?
Well, what I'm seeing is some really creative, I've seen, I will say, I think there are going to be cases. I just can't imagine that there aren't going to be cases where a child with special needs is going to need some physical assistance, right? So I think, I don't know if teachers will wear gloves. I know I have friends who have children with autism who say, my child is not going to wear a mask. Like, that's just not going to be a thing. And so it's just going to be highly individualized. Again, make sure you communicate those expectations clearly. I do want teachers touching my child. I do not want any interaction. It's just going to be really hard. I can't say in every instance, but they are getting very creative with how they're trying to, it has forced a lot of innovation in education. That's for sure.
Absolutely. RM and Irma both. Yes, I'm writing it down right now. I got my pen. I'm going to find you somebody who can maybe give us a little bit more insight into the special needs world and a little bit more of what the concerns are, maybe that we aren't even thinking about, or maybe what the little victories could be. So I'll get on that for you. Yes, Jerry, I'm going to get on it. I promise. A couple of questions coming in about private schools, and there are a lot of questions about, will the mask order apply to private schools? It does.
Yes.
So quickly answers that one. Yes, private schools, teachers, students, everybody in there needs to be wearing a mask according to the state order. Quickly, we'll answer that question. Second of all, these guidelines that we're expecting to come out from the Alabama Department of Public Health, we're hoping those will come out tomorrow. I know last week, Dr. Scott Harris said that they would be out late last week, but today's Monday. We're kind of pushing that a little bit. Hopefully we'll get them maybe tomorrow. But will those guidelines also apply to private schools?
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what is done there. I know that the Alabama Department of Public Health is supposed to, they're calling it a toolkit for schools. And it has some schools nervous. The ones that are opening this week, it's like, what if they make us do this and we don't have the equipment to do that? You know, like to check temperatures at the door or something like that. And we don't have any thermometers. And, those things are hard to find. It's hard enough to just get enough disinfectant wipes for classrooms, right? I mean, it's not like they can, as it was described to me this morning, we can't turn on a dime,
Right.
if with schools that are opening in the next week or so. And some are guessing that will probably delay schools again, depending upon how lengthy and thick this guidance is. But yeah, that's going to be big. And we're also waiting. And one thing I want to make sure we don't forget this is, for the children doing virtual learning, especially in the virtual only districts, they're the waivers that allow schools to deliver meals out into neighborhoods and in places other than the school. That waiver is a federal waiver from some regulations. It ends the first day of school or August 31st, whichever is first. So like Mobile County, the kids will have to come to school. If these waivers are not extended, kids will have to come to school to pick up their meals. And that's going to be a hardship on a lot of families. So there's some political pressure to try to get the Secretary of Agriculture to extend those waivers, because it's going to mean if schools are not able to take the meals into the neighborhoods, it's going to be difficult for a lot of kids to get food. So make sure if your child needs a school meal, make sure and you're living in a virtual only district, or your child is registered to attend a virtual only district. Make sure you know where your meals are coming from and how you're going to get them.
Good point there, Trish. Let's talk to a question from Raven, Irma, and Bonnie as well. Internet access. And that is something that we have seen that's been a problem across Alabama in rural areas and low income areas, that especially a lot of these districts that are going virtual only. I can put the map back up in a minute, but these virtual only districts, a lot of them are in places where the internet access is little to none for many people. Let's talk about what's being done to increase that internet access.
Okay, so we have seen, and we continue to see the rollout of broadband expansion grants from Governor Ivey's office. The ADECA, and I'm going to mess that up, but I know the acronym, they are administering those grants to try and expand access to broadband, because it's one thing, you can have a cell signal, but if you can't download a video that accompanies your lesson because you just don't have enough internet speed there, bandwidth, then you may as well not have internet at all. So we're talking about like a minimum bandwidth to be able to do instructional type activities. So that continues. Broadband expansion continues. They are outfitting school buses with Wi-Fi capabilities so that they can drive them into neighborhoods or park them in front of libraries or something, where kids can access the internet. But something really big that came out at the end of last week is that Governor Ivey announced they're using the federal CARES Act money to give $100 million in internet vouchers. Okay, so for kids who you have to have access, like you already, you've got to go through a provider. and the details are not out yet, but it's really good news for kids, because some kids, they might live in the city, but they just don't have internet because it's expensive, right? So
Right.
they might have a cell signal, but again, cell signals only do so much. You can't really do all of your homework on a phone.
Right. And that's kind of, I think, here what Raven was asking about parents who can't afford internet services. And
Right.
I mean, me and Trish are both coming at you through internet, and it is expensive. And I think that we all, unfortunately, who do have internet, we have to deal with that. But there are
Right.
people who just can't afford it. So
Right.
these vouchers, you said that the details aren't exactly out yet. Do we know when those will be released and how people apply for those vouchers?
Yeah, the basic information said that families will get a letter. They'll be notified. They'll somehow be told that they qualify for these internet vouchers. But then, you got to get it set up. You've got to get somebody out there to install it. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, and I'm waiting on those details. But we do have, the basic announcement of what this means. And hopefully, I don't know how many kids $100 million can serve. But I'm hoping that will be a lot of kids. And I think it has to be used. It's only through the end of December because all of this money, this federal money, has to be used by the end of December.
Right. I'm really interested at some of the comments coming in here. There's one from Kathy, and this is interesting, and I'm not educated on this, and Trish, you probably will be. She says buses that maybe have Wi-Fi but no air conditioning. What about kids with masks on buses with no air conditioning in August, 90 plus degrees? These Wi-Fi buses, can you talk about that a little bit about what Kathy's talking about? Are these buses actually meant for children to sit on the bus and use the internet?
Well, so buses equipped with Wi-Fi can serve two purposes. Like initially, before coronavirus came, it was a way to, I think Huntsville had installed Wi-Fi on buses. I know Hoover had, and I think it was a way to allow kids to do their homework on the way home, right? Some kids in rural areas have an hour-long bus ride one way, right? So they're spending 2 hours on the bus. So let's make those 2 hours useful. And that was the original purpose in, getting Wi-Fi on the bus. Then they realized that buses could be used as Wi-Fi hotspots, school buses. So like we wrote about, Perry County did that. They equipped 3 buses, I think it was, with Wi-Fi, and they parked them at different places throughout the community when the schools shut down in March so that kids could access the internet. So that's what they're kind of being used as, just mobile hotspots. And of course, they're not left running. But now let's go to the masks on the buses part of it. That sounds really uncomfortable. I mean, there's no really great way to say, wow, that's something to look forward to. But bus drivers have been told, you need to lower for ones that don't have air conditioning, lower the windows, open up the hatch in the top, try and get as much airflow in there as possible. And that's just good practice for, even with kids without masks, right? But
right. Well, and it's, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this here, but it's disgraceful that there are buses in Alabama in 2020 that do not have air conditioning. And it is and something I believe it was John here said, it's also disgraceful that there are places that don't have internet access in broadband across Alabama. And if you're somebody like me who hasn't been on a school bus and God knows when, it is just amazing that there are still buses without air conditioning.
Yeah, it's an expensive pursuit. And one of the things that Alabama has never done well, and I mean state lawmakers, and I mean communities paying taxes, we don't fund buses very well. We never have fully funded the cost of busing. So you've got places, rural counties that don't have a lot of local tax base, and the state funds about 80% of the cost of buses. And so they're having to devote a large portion of their school budgets to running school buses, right? Just to operate them. And where in a smaller city district, maybe if they run buses, they don't run as many miles. And so it doesn't cost as much. And therefore they can use that money for instruction. So you've got districts already. I mean, what this has done is has put a big flashlight and a microscope on the inequities. It's just laid them bare. And in Alabama, we have extreme inequities. And at the state level, we know that we do not fund schools adequately. That's been stated, it's been researched, it's been written. There is not enough money coming from the state to fund schools. So we put that on local school districts, and some have no wealth in which to spend for schools. But that is a whole nother story, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I won't climb on my soapbox, but quick question. And this is something that is really interesting from Matthew. Matthew said, Google has worked with the Huntsville school districts to expand cellular service in the area. However, how do we get them available for rural areas? They have the technology to make Wi-Fi available through things like hot air balloons. So why is this not happening?
I have no idea. Just quite frankly, it's all about somebody. What I find usually is somebody somewhere in a community says, we need to do this. This is important. Let's go do it. And they find a way to do it. It's not something that has a lot of structure at the top to say, yes, it's important for everybody in the state to have access to the internet. And of course, in that area in North Alabama, it's the tech capital of the state, really. And Google has done a lot. I mean, when Google comes into your community, they generally build up the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, and that has tremendously helped places. I mean, even like Jackson County, which is not there, it's not Huntsville, it's not Madison County, but they have access that they would not otherwise have had if Google hadn't moved in. So, it takes people being active and saying, this is important. That's not something I've ever been active around, but for some people, it has been their platform for years to say, we need more digital access in rural areas, because, what happens is those areas just kind of go away. I mean, and kids move, young people move to places where there's internet access. So it's really important to make that accessible for economic purposes, not just for digital learning purposes.
Right. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. Unfortunately, I think we're, this is our time today. And if y'all have more questions, let us know. I will leave the links to the map we talked about, to the broadband voucher story. And there was another story. I'm going to leave those links in here so you can find them. I believe it was Raven that had a question on the vouchers. We'll get all that to you in these comments so you can read that and read what we've reported there. If you have other questions, please let Trish or I know. Again, we're expecting a lot more information to come out this week about back to school. So stay tuned both here on the AL.com Facebook page here with me, and also on AL.com itself, to get all of your information about schools reopening and about going back to school. So Trish, thanks so much for giving us a little bit of your insight today. And for everybody else, we will see you tomorrow.